The architecture of invisible things. The light on the stage was the kind that makes everything outside its circle disappear. I had been warned about this during orientation, that the ceremony lights were theatrical, designed to make the graduating class feel singular, lifted, important. What they didn't mention was that the same lights made it nearly impossible to see the audience. The rows of seats became a dark blur, a suggestion of people rather than the people themselves. You had to squint hard and trust that whoever you were looking for was there. I didn't squint. I already knew. My phone buzzed twice in the breast pocket of my gown while I stood in line waiting for my row to be called. I had put it on silent out of habit, a leftover instinct from years of hospital floors where sound meant urgency and urgency meant someone's life had changed. The buzz was softer here, more civilized. I told myself to ignore it. I ignored it for approximately 40 seconds. The first notification was a comment on a photo my Uncle Ray had posted that morning. A graduation photo of me from my hospital department page, the one they used for the faculty directory, my white coat pressed and collar straight, my expression measured and professional. He had captioned it something I hadn't read yet. The comment underneath, from an account I recognized as a cousin I'd grown up sharing Christmas dinners with, simply said, "You're not even a real doctor." I read it twice. Then I read it again. Not because I misunderstood it, because I understood it perfectly, and I was testing myself to see if understanding it would break something open in my chest. It didn't. That was the part that told me something had already shifted long before this day. The second notification was a photo. Tagged. My mother, Diane, in a white sundress, her hair loose and salt-lightened. My father, Mark, in linen the color of beach sand. My sister, Brooke, in oversized sunglasses that took up half her face, laughing at something off-camera. Behind them, a cliffside chapel, bone white against a sky so relentlessly blue it looked like a postcard someone had manufactured to sell happiness. The sea was the color of cobalt glass. Champagne flutes raised. Caption: Family time is the best time. Dreams come true. The row ahead of me began to move. Someone's name was called. The room applauded. I slid my phone back into my pocket and walked forward when it was my turn, smiled when the photographer's camera found me, accepted the folder with both hands and the practiced composure of someone who had spent years learning to hold themselves together in rooms where everything was falling apart. The seat in the reserved family section, the one I had booked, the one I had printed their names on, the one I had sent confirmation emails about with the subject line "Don't be late," they're reading my name early, was empty. All four of them. Empty the way rooms are empty when no one has been there all day. Not vacated. Never occupied. I stood alone at the edge of the frame, my smile steady, my eyes searching the crowd the way you search for something you've already quietly accepted is gone. The first time my mother told someone that Brooke was her beautiful girl, I was 11 years old and standing at the kitchen sink with soap sliding down my wrist. There were neighbors over. The Castellanos from 2 doors down, both of them the kind of people who spoke in exclamation points and brought wine without being asked. They had been admiring Brooke's recital photos on the refrigerator. Brooke in her costume, Brooke in the wings, Brooke center stage, Brooke with her instructor's hand on her shoulder while the instructor beamed like she'd personally discovered talent. And when Mrs. Castellano turned to my mother and said, "You must be so proud of your girls," my mother smiled, that particular smile she reserved for social performances, and said, "Brooke is my beautiful girl." A pause. The kind that asks a question without asking it. "And Helen?" "Well." Another smile, softer. The sort you'd offer someone explaining a minor inconvenience. "She studies hard. It evens things out." I heard it. My mother knew I heard it. She didn't turn around. Brooke giggled from the kitchen island, where she was braiding and unbraiding her hair in sections, not looking at anyone in particular, just absorbing the warmth of the room the way a cat absorbs sunlight, with complete, unself-conscious ease, as though it had always been and always would be directed at her. My father, Mark, was in the living room. He would have heard it too through the open doorway, through the thin architecture of our house that carried sound like a rumor. He didn't say anything. He never said anything. His silence wasn't cruel exactly. It was more like the silence of a man who has assessed the structure of his household and determined that intervention costs more than agreement. He nodded at arrangements. He ratified them with his stillness. The plate in my hand stayed midair for a moment. Then I set it in the drying rack and reached for the next one. I didn't have a word for it then. I was 11. I just felt the shape of it. An arrangement. A hierarchy as real and established as the floor plan of the house, as the way Sunday dinners were set up with Brooke beside my mother and me beside the wall, as the way any compliment directed at me was received politely and then rerouted. But Brooke is really something. It evens things out. I thought about those 4 words a lot over the years. The mathematics of them. The quiet suggestion that Brooke's beauty was a gift so substantial it required something from me to balance the ledger. That my intelligence was not a gift at all but a counterweight. A compensation for what I lacked. A way of making myself useful in the economy of family worth. Beauty was precious. Studying hard was what you did when you didn't have something better. I learned early not to expect the recital dress to be steamed and waiting. Mine was always hemmed the night before by me, cross-legged on my bedroom floor with a needle and thread borrowed from the utility drawer because I had been too afraid to ask and too proud to go without. I learned not to expect my birthday to occupy the same mental square footage as Brooke's, which was planned in advance with themed decorations and a guest list and a cake ordered from the bakery on Clement Street that Diane spent 20 minutes selecting. Mine arrived when it arrived at all, as a leftover cupcake from some other occasion, a candle pushed in sideways, a song sung with the distracted warmth of people who had just remembered. I learned to clean up before the good part started when cousins came over. I learned to stand behind Brooke when she was being presented, to be the shadow at the edge of the compliment, to smile when someone said and this must be the other one and to say yes, that's right with an evenness that took years to develop into something that felt like grace rather than resignation. I told myself it didn't matter. I was good at many things. I was good at school, at focus, at the kind of sustained effort that doesn't photograph well but compounds over years into something real and permanent. I was good at making myself smaller in spaces where there wasn't enough room for both of us, and I was good at expanding when I was finally somewhere that had room for me, a classroom, a laboratory, a hospital floor at 3 a.m. Where no one cared what you looked like, only what you knew, only what you could do. I told myself none of the rest of it mattered. I believed it, mostly. I believed it because the alternative was to sit with the full weight of what it meant to grow up as the useful one, the studying hard one, the one who evens things out, and that weight was substantial enough that I chose for years not to look at it directly. The acceptance letter to the competitive science program arrived on a Tuesday in April when I was 16. I opened it at the kitchen table because that felt ceremonious enough. The kitchen table, the afternoon light, my backpack still on the chair beside me. Diane was in the middle of something, phone pressed to her ear, pacing the tile in a slow orbit. Mark was in the garage. Brooke was somewhere upstairs. I read the letter twice and then looked up. Mom. She held up a finger. One moment. I waited. When she finally clicked off the call and turned, I slid the letter across the table. She picked it up, skimmed it the way people skim things they don't intend to read closely, and set it back down. That's nice, sweetheart. She patted the corner of it. Make sure you congratulate Brooke before dinner. Her friend invited her to prom. She's over the moon. I looked at the letter on the table between us. Mark came in from the garage and washed his hands at the sink. What's that? Helen got into that science program, Diane said, in the same tone she used to report that the dry cleaning was ready. Good for you, Helen. He dried his hands. Keep working hard. It'll pay off for all of us someday. He meant it kindly. I know he did. But the phrase for all of us lodged itself somewhere beneath my ribs like a splinter that had gone in clean and angled, too shallow to remove, deep enough to press against something every time I moved in a certain direction. I couldn't explain it at 16. I only knew it felt off. That my accomplishment had been received not as mine but as a resource. Not as a thing I had done but as a thing that would eventually be useful. It would take me years to understand that this was exactly the framework my family had always used when they looked at me. Part 2. The compound interest of being useful. I left for college and did not look back in any way that cost me time. This is not to say I didn't love my family. I did, with the complicated, conditional love of someone who has learned that love and equity are different things, and that choosing to love someone who has never weighed you fairly is a private act of generosity that rarely gets named as such. I loved them the way you love a house you grew up in that was never quite warm enough, with familiarity, with attachment, with a certain gratitude for its walls and a clear-eyed understanding of its drafts. I called on Sundays. I sent birthday cards with handwritten notes. I asked after Brooke's recitals, her competitions, her various social milestones, and listened with genuine interest to the detailed summaries Diane offered. Because Brooke's life was always available for summary in a way mine was not invited to be. When I got to medical school, the calls shifted. They became shorter and more purposeful. Diane called when something needed fixing. Mark called when something needed paying. Brooke sent messages in the form of single lines followed by emoji. So stressed heart, do you think you could help with something? Heart, never mind, forget, I asked, which was a grammar I had learned to translate as, the request is coming, this is the prelude. The first time I sent money home I was in my second year of residency, running on 4 hours of sleep and a hospital cafeteria meal I had eaten standing up over a trash can because there was nowhere to sit. My mother called to say the heating system had failed, and the repair estimate was more than they had. She said it quietly, the way she said things she needed, with a kind of dignified resignation designed to make refusal feel like cruelty. I transferred the money that night from my phone, standing in a hospital corridor with the overhead fluorescents buzzing and someone's monitor beeping at a distance. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, in the same tone she used to comment on moderate weather. I told her it was fine. I told myself it was fine. I went back to work. Over the following years, the requests developed their own rhythm, not constant but regular enough to feel structural. The roof repair after the winter storm. The dental emergency that turned out to be Brooke's crowns, which she had been putting off because the insurance didn't cover the full cost and she hadn't budgeted for it. The down payment for Mark's new car when his lease ended, and he didn't want to lease again because leasing was throwing money away. Various utilities. A credit card that had gotten away from them. The house Brooke moved into, which everyone described as a gift. The family is helping Brooke get settled, but where every bill, every repair deposit, every overdue notice arrived through me. I paid them. All of them. Not because I was afraid to say no, but because I told myself this was what you did for family. That the money I had was partly a product of opportunity they had never had, and that using it to smooth their difficulties was an extension of love. I told myself their gratitude was real even when it was brief. I told myself the silence after a transfer, Brooke's 3-second heart emoji, Diane's polite thank you that lasted exactly as long as a weather observation, was simply how some people receive things. What none of them ever asked was how long I had gone without sleep. What none of them ever asked was what it cost, not financially but structurally, to show up every day on a hospital floor and be responsible for people's lives, and then come home to an apartment too quiet to feel like home, too empty to feel like proof that any of it mattered, and to find 3 messages waiting, each one a variation on could you help with something.